I set the last crystal goblet in place and stepped back, admiring the gleam of salmon on Grandma Alice's antique china and the way the embroidered tablecloth fell perfectly across the mahogany. The television hummed at precisely the level my mother preferred, and from the living room, Vera Lynn called out to ask whether I had remembered the lemon wedges. I fanned them the way she liked 12 tidy arcs, like I'd done for 12 steady years. Cousin Lucas arrived with a brisk kiss and a bottle of white wine. The Andersons from next door followed with a silver-wrapped gift. By the time we lifted our glasses, the evening seemed sealed inside a glass dome I had polished for a decade, a small, curated gathering arranged around the woman who raised me. I began the toast, but my mother's voice slipped neatly over mine. She said, only one gift that would truly matter. Her smile never faltered as her eyes cooled. She wanted me to leave her life. The fork in June. Parker's hand stopped midair. Lucas stared at his plate. The silence pulled long and sticky. I set my glass down and felt the ground tip. I did not argue. I did not beg. I stood crossed to the coat closet, slipped into my jacket, and walked out into the cool evening. The cake remained uncut, the candles unlit, and the air outside cooled my burning cheeks, as if the night itself were instructing me to breathe. 12 years earlier, I had been 26 a semester from completing my master's in art. My work had been called revelatory by Professor Harwood, who had hinted at gallery introductions once I graduated. Then my mother's call came trembling and urgent a fall, a hip surgery, months of recovery. I packed 3 suitcases and told myself I'd be home for 6 months. 6 months became a year unspooled into 2. 2 drifted into 12 while I made dinners, arranged pills, adjusted the television volume to the correct notch, and deferred my own life until deferral hardened into identity. I told myself I was being good. I told myself I was being necessary. I told myself love is a ledger we balance by staying. In the days after the birthday scene, my phone lit with my mother's name, then dimmed again as I let the calls go unanswered. I opened a leather-bound journal I had given myself last Christmas and written in precisely once. On the first clean page, I wrote a sentence I couldn't take back. I have been erased from my own life. I locked my bedroom door for the first time since returning home, and the click felt like a door opening elsewhere beyond the beige walls I had never chosen. Memories lined up asking to be counted. The week I returned from an art retreat to discover my soft yellow bedroom repainted to an efficient beige. The posters and books removed. My space remade as if I had been a guest who'd overstayed. The way my shoulders had learned to curve inward to take up less air. Standing before the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back, hair pulled tight for practicality. Fine lines stitching the years into my face, a practiced neutrality in my eyes. I had once painted with color I felt in my bones. Now I stacked dishware and measured lemon slices and kept the house running like a machine that fed on my attention. On the 4th morning, I walked to the bank with a hollow feeling I tried to name and couldn't. Under the fluorescent lights, I asked to see my transactions for the past year. The teller's expression shifted as she scrolled. She printed transfers from our joint account into an account under my mother's name, then produced paper slips carrying my signature. Only the signature wasn't mine. The loop in the S was lazy, the final stroke too long. 8 transfers, the teller said softly. $7,800 in total for this past year, and similar activity in earlier statements. She mentioned my mother had explained to their manager last month that I approved all household expenses. The room tilted. I thanked her and left with a manila folder that felt heavier than paper should. Back home, my mother and June sat at the kitchen table, teacups gleaming like props under warm light. The brooch at my mother's collar, the cameo that had disappeared from my jewelry box last Christmas, caught the sun. They fell silent when I entered. My mother praised my devotion, her tone light, as if good cheer could erase the bruise of the night I'd been told to leave her life. June asked politely about roof repairs my mother claimed we had needed in April. There had been no storm severe enough for damage, no invoice I had seen, no leak I had mopped. Later, while my mother napped, I opened her desk and found documents I did not recognize, an altered deed shifting our home's ownership so that my name, once equal, had been reduced to a token share. Tax forms that folded my wages into household contributions. Notes referencing accounts I had never opened. When I checked my separate savings, the emergency fund I had built from my library salary, careful deposit after careful deposit, now read $1,247.82. Last year, it had been over $12,000. In the attic where I had stored my brushes, paints, and canvases, I found labeled bins for my mother's new craft hobby, stacked precisely where my art had lived. When I asked, she waved me away. I wasn't using those old things, and she needed space for ceramics. She added with the sharpness I recognized from childhood that the house ran her way or not at all. That night, a neighbor's lavender-scented note slid under my door. "You are not invisible, and you are not wrong." I pressed the page into my journal and felt something inside me steady, the way a fence post firms under the last rock tamped against its base. June called me the next morning, her voice low and urgent. She asked if my mother was nearby, then confessed she had overheard her telling others that I was unstable. Vera Lynn had apparently shown friends a glossy brochure for a care facility, warning that I might soon need intervention. My throat tightened. I asked why June was telling me this, and she admitted she had seen enough to know something was wrong. It wasn't right, she said, the way my mother twisted things. By the time we hung up, I felt both shaken and oddly lighter, as though the truth once spoken aloud had begun to anchor me again. That afternoon, I met with an attorney, Thomas Reyes, and spread the folder of bank statements, forged transfers, and altered deeds across his polished desk. He listened quietly until I finished, then explained that financial exploitation of family members was more common than most wanted to believe, but provable. He told me we could protect what remained and build a case for separation. Driving home, I weighed whether to confront my mother outright or to prepare quietly. Confrontation might satisfy the fury I felt, but careful planning could preserve what little stability I had left. Within days, my mother's counterattack was in full swing. Cousin Lucas left voicemails urging me to call back, his voice lined with concern he clearly thought was warranted. Neighbors who once waved kindly now stared with pursed lips. Whispers followed me from porches, such a shame when the caretaker needs care. When I opened the mail one afternoon, I found a formal invitation on my mother's monogrammed stationery. A family meeting scheduled at June's house, but my name was not listed among the attendees. I was no longer a participant in my own life, just a topic on their agenda. The following morning brought worse news. A credit card statement arrived in my name, but carried charges I had never made a diamond bracelet fine dining a spa retreat. At the credit bureau office, the clerk scrolled through my record and revealed 3 accounts opened within the past 8 months, all with balances all tied to my name. She slid a fraud form toward me, but her voice softened when she added, "It gets complicated when it's family." Complicated felt too small a word. That night, I searched for my birth certificate and social security card. The folder was empty. My passport was gone, my college diplomas stripped from the walls, leaving faint outlines on the paint. I began carrying my driver's license tucked into my bra rather than my purse. Each morning, I photographed my room, comparing the images. When I returned, a brush shifted a drawer, a jar glass is missing. Someone was searching, nibbling at the edges of my existence. Then, unexpectedly, another note slid under my door. Plain paper, lavender scented again. "You are not invisible, and you are not wrong." No signature, but I knew it came from Elaine, the neighbor down the street, who always smiled kindly at the supermarket. I tucked the note beside the first and let myself breathe. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. The Saturday of the family meeting arrived. I listened from the hallway as my mother painted me, fragile, unstable, ungrateful. Lucas's deep voice promised to talk sense into me. Something inside me shifted, then a plate finally breaking under pressure. I stepped into the kitchen doorway. Lucas began reciting my supposed offenses, reckless spending, paranoia, accusations. My mother added that I was dramatic, inheriting a streak from my father's side. But when I spoke, my voice came steady. No one has the right to demand my entire life, not even my parent. For once my words did not tremble. Then the doorbell rang. Standing there was Tomas' briefcase in hand with Elaine just behind him. They entered, and suddenly the balance in the room tilted. Thomas laid out notarized bank statements, highlighted forgeries, evidence of accounts opened without my consent. Elaine confirmed she had heard my mother admit to signing my name for convenience. My mother's face paled. Lucas stammered, unconvincing. I announced that I would be freezing the joint accounts and separating property. My mother snapped, claiming she was my mother as if the word entitled her to everything I was. But I met her eyes and said firmly that it did not. That evening, after everyone had gone, I returned from a walk to find my mother packing my clothing into suitcases. She said she was helping me leave if independence was what I wanted. But this time, instead of fear, I felt freedom. 2 days later, a locksmith placed new keys in my palm. 3 exterior doors, 2 interior. My house. I walked through each room, testing locks, feeling space open for me at last. The master bedroom, once hers, now bore a brass deadbolt of my own choosing. My phone buzzed with a text from Tomas' accounts, separated 6 forged signatures documented. For 12 years, I had been a ghost in my own home. Now, piece by piece, I was becoming solid again. When Vera Lynn returned, her key scraped uselessly in the lock. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by indignation. We locked eyes through the window. I opened the door just a crack and told her belongings were in the guest room and that we needed to discuss the forgeries. She sputtered loud enough for the neighbors to hear, crying that her daughter had locked her out. But I corrected her steady as stone my home. She threatened to call Lucas. I closed the door gently, without fear. That night, June called to warn me that Vera Lynn was planning an emergency family meeting at her house, claiming I had lost touch with reality. This time, June offered to record it for me. I asked why she was helping, and she admitted that she had heard enough contradictions to doubt. Vera Lynn had once bragged openly about using my credit for a cruise, confident I would never notice. June's voice carried guilt, but also resolve. She had been quiet too long. The next day, Lucas phoned me, his voice cautious, almost apologetic. He admitted he had just left June's house, where my mother had painted me as irrational, ungrateful, and perhaps dangerous. But he added that some of her claims didn't make sense. She had insisted I never paid household expenses yet. He remembered me mentioning a second job to help cover supposed roof repairs. I invited him over, promising to show him everything. When he arrived, I laid the documents across the kitchen table: forged transfer slips, altered deeds, credit statements. His brow furrowed deeper with each page. Finally, he asked why I hadn't spoken up sooner. "Would you have believed me over her?" I asked. He said nothing, which was answer enough. Later that day, my phone rang again. My mother's voice wavered, trembling with a fragility I knew too well. She claimed her heart was failing, that she needed me to take her in. For 12 years I had rushed to each crisis she conjured, but this time I told her Lucas could drive her to the emergency room. If doctors confirmed anything serious, we would discuss next steps. The silence on the other end revealed what I had suspected: the illness was another performance. Still, 2 mornings later, she appeared on my doorstep, leaning heavily on a cane, face drawn with exaggerated pain. She begged to be let inside. I opened the door, and watched as she collapsed dramatically into the armchair I had reclaimed. When I offered to call an ambulance, she refused too quickly. In the hallway mirror, I caught her reflection, the grimace melting into calculation as she inventoried the room. Then the bell rang again, and Lucas stepped inside. He said he wanted to help mediate. My mother immediately clutched her chest and begged him to tell me how serious her condition was. Before he could respond, I fetched the manila folder I had prepared. I laid out notarized statements, each forged signature, highlighted each false transfer documented. Lucas examined them slowly, his certainty crumbling. I added another paper, her recent medical records showing a perfectly healthy heart. He stared at her, color draining from his face. "Aunt, is this true?" he asked. My mother faltered, then snapped. She admitted she had kept me by her side with a lie that the fall 12 years earlier had been no fracture at all, only a bruise. Her mask cracked, revealing fury beneath. She claimed she needed me, that she couldn't be left like everyone else had left her. Lucas reeled, realizing the manipulation had spanned over a decade. I pulled a suitcase from the closet and set it by the door. Inside were only her belongings. When she reached for a crystal vase, I told her firmly it was Grandma Alice's and would remain here. Lucas stepped between us. "Let's just take what's in the suitcase," he urged quietly. My mother's eyes filled with tears on command. She declared that no one would ever love me the way she did. Once those words had been a chain, but now they sounded hollow, even cruel. "Thank God for that," I replied. Lucas guided her out, her protests echoing down the walkway. As the door shut, relief swept over me like clean air after a storm. 2 weeks passed. Elaine arrived one morning with coffee and news Vera Lynn had moved to Phoenix with cousin Margaret. The family was in an uproar, but I found myself less concerned than I would have imagined. Later, I uncovered a box I hadn't opened since my art school days. Inside lay my old sketchbook filled with unfinished ideas and one self-portrait left without a face. I traced the outline with my finger, promising myself that tomorrow I would buy new pencils. For the first time in years, the thought didn't feel indulgent. It felt necessary. Months later, I sat in a community art class, sunlight spilling across my canvas as I struggled to capture a spring landscape. Professor Winters leaned over my shoulder, praising my use of light. I nodded, shy but grateful. My home had transformed 2 beige walls, replaced by warm terracotta heavy furniture, swapped for pieces that felt like mine. My paintings lined the walls where once faceless Victorian prints had hung. Small freedoms multiplied. I bought coffee without rehearsing justifications. I rearranged furniture without permission. I began to feel the world expand again. One evening, almost a year after the birthday dinner that had shattered everything, I hosted my own gathering. The salmon marinated in my recipe, not hers. A bold, geometric cloth covered my table. Elaine arrived with wildflowers from her garden, Tomas with a bottle of wine, and June with a hesitant smile that softened into warmth when I welcomed her. Lucas joined us later, his loyalty tempered now by humility. The house buzzed with laughter that sounded freer than anything I had heard in years. When dessert came, a tart lemon pie that would once have been dismissed as too sharp, Thomas lifted his glass to seeing ourselves clearly at last. I added, "And to those who help us see." The words carried weight because they were true. The next morning, I planted lavender and mint seedlings in the garden soil, cool between my fingers. 2 neighbor girls arrived with muffins, explaining that their mother had started painting again because my garden made her feel braver. I smiled, realizing that perhaps my story could ripple outward, encouraging others to reclaim what they had lost. Later, I wrote in my journal, "Maybe freedom isn't given, it's built one boundary at a time. And maybe the truest lesson is that love, real love, never demands the erasure of who we are." If this story moved, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Would you choose clean breaks or careful boundaries?